And we are recording with Mr. Mike Vecchione on Monday, November 6th, 2023 at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. Mr. Vecchione's been on here a multitude of times before. You can see over his shoulder all of the books he's written and co-authored. And originally I was thinking, yeah, through Bruce Sackman, who I haven't talked to Bruce in for I think 3 years, but through him I met you, and you and I have become good friends from that. And
Good. I'm happy.
yeah,
I'm
he
happy
yeah,
Bruce did that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I hope Bruce is doing all right. But
Well,
so
Bruce was at my last. He came to the last book
okay.
release event a few weeks ago. So
Well, and you
book we're
worked with
talking about.
yeah, yeah, and you worked with him through Behind the Murder Curtain, which is
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
kind of tying all those in, and anyone that's kind of paid attention or was, fought along with you, is you could almost kind of piece together the creation of this current book, and how you've kind of started to exercise your creative muscle and tie in a link of all of these cases you've worked on, which are just all batshit, just crazy cases, crazy life experiences, and there's just a whole array of them. And then the question is like, well, how do you tie those together? And that's where we've got to now. We've covered your book Fallen Angel Part 1, and now we're going through really Part 2 or Volume 2, and how these have all tied together. The link to that book is in the description, but as I post the live link, Mike, will you please take it away and kind of tell everyone what we're talking about?
Well, first, let me start by thanking you, Tommy, for
Yes,
having
sir.
me again. Every time I appear, it's a pleasure for me, and I hope for your listeners and your viewers, because
Absolutely.
I really enjoy talking to them and to you. So
Thank you.
thanks again.
Yes, sir.
So you hit it right on the head. I have been an attorney and a prosecutor for a very, very long time, and my last stint at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office was in the Rackets Division. Um, and before that, I was the chief of trials. Before that, I was the chief of the Homicide Bureau. So I've done a lot myself. I supervised a lot of cases, but I write about the cases that were my cases. All of the books that I have co-authored and now written myself have been cases, except for Behind the Murder Curtain, which you mentioned, which Bruce Sackman is the centerpiece of. He was an investigator and for the Veterans Administration, Inspector General. And but the rest of the books have been mine, my cases, my adventures, I like to call them, because there were a few a few harrowing adventures in those in doing those cases. And but the last two books that I've written, Fallen Angel, it's called a true crime fantasy. And I have to confess, I made up that genre, because what the book
Kind of fantasy.
consists of are cases that are true. They're real cases. And the fantasy aspect comes in, as you had mentioned, with tying them together. Book agents who I worked with in the past told me that the cases that I wanted to write about would be no longer than short story length, and putting a book of short stories, true crime short stories, together would be very difficult to sell. So they said in these exact words: find a way to to tie them together, and you've got something. Well, I did. I had an old idea back. I can't even remember when I came upon this. It had to do with the case that I was doing, and it became part of book one. In fact, the last story in book one, which is about the killing of a young woman on the Williamsburg Bridge here in Brooklyn, and Manhattan, connects Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I remember when I tried the case, she was a young Hasidic woman, and she was doing nothing but walking for exercise on the bridge one Sunday morning, and she was set upon by a guy who was a junkie and wanted her money, and she had none, so he killed her. And then to top it off, he came back later that night and burnt her body, doused it with gasoline and burnt her body. And I recall when I tried the case and summed up to the jury, I basically said that it was this guy was Satan. He was the devil, had come to Brooklyn and done this to this young woman. Stuck with me forever. And I tossed it around, and my former co-writer, Jerry Schmetterer, who is now unfortunately passed away, we had talked about maybe using that line in some way. And so when the book agent said to me, try to find a way to tie it together, the idea of my statement about the devil coming to Brooklyn kind of hit home with me. And I said, you know what, let me give this a shot. So I wrote a proposal, a book proposal, and I had been involved with a publisher out here on, I live in Queens, but it's not far from the Nassau County, which is the next county over, east of me. And I had been involved with her and had been on several of her local television shows pitching the other books. She ran a show called Between the Covers, Author's Corner, 2 different shows, and I had appeared on. So I got to know her very well. So I went to her and I said, her name is Stephanie Larkin, and she runs a company called Red Penguin Books. And I called her up and said, Stephanie, you have time for a meeting? I really want to run something past you. And she said, sure, come on. So I went to her office and I sat down with her and I told her my idea. And she said, sounds very interesting. Of course, true crime fantasy is not necessarily one of the categories we have, but it's essentially a crime novel, and which is what you're talking about, with real crimes. And I said, yes. She said, you know what, give me a proposal, or send me a proposal, and I'll talk to my people about it, and I'll get back to you. Well, I had the proposal with me. I handed it to her. Several days later, I got a call from her, and she said, you know, Mike, not only do I love this idea, but my editors do. And I'm going to give you, we want you to write this book, and we want to publish it. And I'm going to give you a contract, but not for 1 book. It's going to be for 3 books, because this is the kind of story that will go in volumes.
I thought it was 4.
No, it's, well, 3 now. I'm negotiating with her now for the 4th. She's kind of bought the idea of there's going to be a 4th, but right now I'm writing 3. So anyway, that's the genesis of Fallen Angel, a true crime fantasy. And as you said, we've gone through the stories in book 1, and we touched on book 2, which the first story was about the death of a firefighter that in my book, the devil instigates, and the fire that he dies in is in a building attached to a Catholic church, and the Catholic church rectory where the priests live. And his idea initially was to burn this building down and kill the priests. But unfortunately for him, meaning Satan, the firefighters got there quickly, very quickly, and they asked him who he was in the story, and so was his I call him pawn or minion, who actually started the fire. Said the firefighters were excited. Is there anyone inside that building? And they said yes. And of course, it was a lie. Well, the devil was kind of he was kind of shifting and saying, you know, I can't get the priest, so let me do this. And he sent the firefighter in there, and the roof collapsed, killing the firefighter. So that is that's the story of the first book. Now, the first story of the second book. Now, what leads me into part 2 is at the beginning of part 2, the fire marshal who investigates the firefighter's death, along with her partner. Her name is Kathy Bear. Her partner's name is Alex Gazis. They were instrumental in making sure that the guy who set the fire was convicted, and again thwarted the devil's plan. So the way I set up the beginning of part 2 is they're called to a fire in a Manhattan hotel, a luxury hotel in Manhattan. And they get there, of course, after the fire is out, because there was the odor of an accelerant. Fire marshals were called in to investigate the crime, and they were cleared to come onto the floor where the fire occurred, and they were cleared to go into the hotel room where the fire was determined had to have started. And when they went in, as the devil has done in other cases in the books, he causes the floor of that room to collapse, and the two fire marshals fall to the floor below. The male fire marshal is killed, and Kathy Bear is paralyzed. And Michael, when Michael Gioca, who is the protagonist of the book, the prosecutor, who is assigned to battle Satan, finds out about this. He's on vacation with his sons, taking a rest from the other case that he had just done, and he gets back to New York, and he goes to the hospital, and he sees that Kathy, who was instrumental in helping him with the first case, is basically on a respirator, and her parents are in the room, and he meets them, and he visits and finds out from his mentor and the guy that brought him into this fight, a Catholic Monsignor named Sal Romano. He finds out from Romano that at the Manhattan fire, the hotel fire, there was closed circuit television of hotel, and the fire marshals recognized an arsonist who had been arrested in the past in Brooklyn for setting another fire, which killed firefighters. And he was with another guy who the firefighters didn't recognize, and the fire marshals didn't recognize. But when Romano tells Michael what he looked like, and he says that he had the mark of the devil on his left cheek, Michael knows that this is revenge and retaliation for what Alex Gazis, the fire marshal, and Kathy Bear, the fire marshal in the first case, did to him. They basically made that case. So this was his revenge, and he's done it in the past. So Michael now it's in Manhattan. It's not, he can't try the case because he's in Brooklyn, but that case is under investigation. And fortunately for him, unfortunately for Satan, Ricky Sabar, who is the actual torch in the case in Manhattan, is a Brooklyn guy. And the fires that he has set in the past involving the death of 6 firefighters was in Brooklyn. So the fire marshals knew that, this is the guy we have to pick up and question. They pick up Sabar, they talk to him, and he says, I don't know anything about it. I know nothing about this. I was in the hotel, but I didn't set any fire.
Is that the actual term, torch? Is that the actual term, torch, for a serial arsonist?
Torch. He was the torch, yeah. So, but the fire marshals, the superior officers in the fire marshals group say, listen, this guy's going to do something in Brooklyn. We'll get him the next time. And sure enough, he does. And that's the story of part 2. Now, in real life, the story of part 2 is as follows. Ricky Sabar is based on a character whose name I won't say because he wasn't convicted, but he's based on a character who was an arsonist, who years before I did the case that was the basis of part 2 of the book, he had set fire to a supermarket in Brooklyn, in the Sheepshead Bay section of Brooklyn. And the fire weakened the ceiling so much, the firefighters on the roof putting out the fire fell through, and 6 of them were killed. He was arrested, he was tried, and he was convicted, not by me, but by colleagues in my office. And shortly after that, he had, believe it or not, one of the lawyer for one of the victims, who was doing research to do a civil case to fight the fire department, to sue the fire department, came across evidence which he thought cleared this arsonist. He thought that this was evidence that somehow the prosecutor who had the case didn't either find or did and ignored. And he brought a case. He started to represent the person who killed his client. And believe it or not, Tommy, he got him. The case was not dismissed, but the case was set aside. The conviction was set aside. So the arsonist now is at liberty. He's free. Now, The Brooklyn DA at the time, Joe Hines, my boss, at the time of this firefighter death case, was the fire commissioner. So now, and he was the one whose office tried this guy and had the case obviously set aside. So the arsonist gets arrested again in Brooklyn, this time for a murder. It has nothing to do with fire. He strangled a woman on the Coney Island boardwalk who was homeless and pregnant. She was living in an abandoned concession stand. He was a serial rapist in addition to being an arsonist, and he raped her and killed her.
I was about to
And
say, I was about to say, so I mean, some of the, just the setting on fire, the fire, killing the firefighters, the woman on the bridge, lighting her on fire, and then the homeless pregnant. I was about to say, like, you've really dealt with the most like demonic motherfuckers, and then I just had the
yes,
quick
yes,
realization. I was like, hence the book, and that's a stupid
exactly.
comment, but
Otherwise,
no, it just all did. I was about to say, not even thinking about it, I was like, you really do deal with fucking the devil incarnate, and then I was like, oh,
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
book. Sorry.
There you go. You
It
hit it
really
right
is
on the head.
just,
I'm glad that you see, I knew that you were a
it's
smart
so,
guy.
yeah, no, it's just so like it's almost like it's like not only is it, it's like not only is he evil, he also kills puppies. You're like, what the fuck? And then it's just
Right.
like, yeah, no, I,
Yeah.
I get it now. It's like, yeah, no, these are cases where it's like, how is this anything other than Lucifer? Sorry,
Correct.
going.
That's
That's
the
the,
idea.
yeah. All right. Sorry. Yeah.
So in real life, he rapes this woman, kills her, strangles her, and 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 what he does is it's unbelievable. When the police find her, and how they found her is that she was living in this abandoned concession stand, and she had a roommate, a woman who took her in because she was really a pathetic individual. She had a family, but she had mental issues, and she left the family. She went to Coney Island, and she found this other woman who she began living with in this concession stand. And when the morning after the murder, when the bad guy was coming out of the concession stand after he had killed this woman, the roommate was coming home, and she saw him, and she almost ran into him. He ran into her, and then he took off. And then she went in and saw that her roommate was dead. She also noticed all over her, all over the dead woman, she was completely naked in the bed. All over her vagina, on her anus, on her legs was this semen, this liquid semen, and it was anyway. So the story in the book, I take it back a little bit, and I have to set up who the homeless woman is, because I needed to make it, I needed to add a little bit of the why Satan would go after this particular woman. Well, as it turns out in the book, the woman was when she went to live in the concession stand, she had left the convent. She was a nun, a Catholic nun. She became a nun, and she was, in my book, a beautiful woman, and she did a lot of work with people in the parish. And one particular individual wanted to have her have sex with him, and he told her that he loved her, and she loved him, and she said to her mother superior and to her family, "I'm leaving the convent. I'm going to get married to this guy." Well, in the book, once the forbidden fruit was no longer there, she was now leaving the convent. She went to live with him, and he basically said, "You know what? I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." And she goes a little nuts, a lot nuts. And she leaves her family. She had been teaching at a college when she left the convent. She abandoned her job, and she finds herself in Coney Island at the beginning of this, in the spring. And she's really has no place to go, and she's picking at garbage cans in the area. She had hooked up with some guy under the Coney Island boardwalk who was a junkie who rapes her, and that's how come she becomes pregnant in the book. And then he abandons her, and she's now left with nothing. And she's looking around, picking around, and there's a woman who sees her. And the woman was a social worker who had a problem in her job, and she left that job, and she was living in this concession stand in Coney Island. And she sees the homeless woman who's ultimately killed, and says, you know what, you're pregnant, I know where I can get you medical help. And she adopts her essentially, and they live together. They're not lovers, nothing. They're just good friends. And the pregnant lady does go and gets medical help. And she then says, I need to make some money. And she gets a job on the boardwalk, and she's really good looking. That's why I did this. And some guy who owns a concession stand hires her. And he's smart because she was so nice looking and so friendly, and so she used to draw men to buy their food there and buy beers, etc. One of the guys who bought a sandwich and then beer and was infatuated with this woman was Ricky Sabar. He was a Coney Island guy who was a horrible guy. What he did essentially, aside from the arson, what he did in Coney Island in real life, as well as in my book, is he used to rape prostitutes. He would go to a prostitute, have sex with them. When they said, give me my money, he would say, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. I'm walking away. You're not getting any money. And they hated him. The prostitutes hated him. So he finally gets to the point where he has the guts to go up to the pregnant lady, and say, I'd like to take you out on maybe we have dinner together one night. And she says no initially, but one night, after several months go by, she says okay, and she leaves the concession stand with him. And it's uncertain as to where she's going, and this is in the book. And but they're walking towards the concession stand. So I write that what he wanted to do was not have a girlfriend. He wanted to rape her. He wanted to have sex with her. And his buddy, who tells him, go after her, is this guy, Jizz, who is my buddy Satan. He's with him at the hotel. He's the guy that instigates the fire, and he's instigating again for him to take on this woman, because Satan knows that she used to be a nun. And just before this night where he leaves with her, Satan tells him, do you know that she's pregnant? Well, that doesn't turn off Sabar. It turns him on even more. And then what happens is he takes her back to the concession stand, rapes her, kills her, and her roommate, the lady who saved her from the streets, is coming home to the concession stand and sees him. Okay? So she has problems, though. She has mental problems. In fact, she left her job as a social worker because she had counseled somebody to go back to their husband after the husband was abusive to her because she had kids. And she went back to the husband, and as it turns out, it didn't turn out very well. The husband winds up being killed by her because he had abused her. She fought back, and he died. And she now was angry at the social worker for telling her to go back when she shouldn't have gone back. And the social worker loses her mind over this and leaves her job, and again finds her way to Coney Island. So these are the two that come together, the ex-nun and the ex-social worker. But the ex-social worker is in a lot better shape than the ex-nun is, until she got her job and she started eating and she started going for medicine, et cetera, right? So the case in real life is based on two people. The social worker, in real life, she wasn't a social worker. She was just a very nice woman who used to have a job, I think in industry, and she left the job for some reason and she lost her way and went to live in Coney Island. And a prostitute. That's the case. That's my case. Now, let me tell you about the prostitute. So in real life and in the book, when the killer comes out of the concession stand, bumps into the roommate, he takes off down the boardwalk. And on the boardwalk in the morning is my prostitute. Now, I'll tell you what her nickname was, Pinky. And Pinky sees him and she knows him. And he bumps into her, not literally, but he bumps into her and he says to her, "You better not tell anybody you saw me here. You better not tell anybody." And she doesn't know what he's talking about because word had not gotten out that there was somebody killed in the concession stand, and he was running from that direction. Later that day, she sees him again because she's a junkie too. She goes to his brother, who is a dealer, buys drugs from him, and the killer is in the house, and he warns her. He says, "You better not tell anybody that you saw me this morning. If you do, I'm going to kill you." So she keeps it under wraps. Now, the police have obviously find the roommate. They interview her. She says, "I can identify who the killer is," in the book now. And they say, "Okay, when we pick up somebody, we'll have you come in and look at a lineup." Okay. So that's essentially the case at this point. When Michael Vecchione, gets the case, it's not the best case in the world, obviously. It's this homeless woman who is killed, a homeless woman who basically is the only witness, and there's this prostitute. And how do we know about the prostitute? Because the police do a canvass. They want to find out, if anybody knows anything about the death. And sure enough, Pinky says, "I saw this guy running down a boardwalk," and she gives him a name. And of course, she gives him the name in the book, Ricky Sabar. And they just take a statement from her. Now, in real life, I get the case. The woman who is the roommate is not the best witness. However, enough for me to get an indictment against. She identifies the real killer, and I get an indictment. And I'm in the office one day, and I'm going through all of the police reports, as Michael Gioca does in the book, trying to see what else there is. What did we miss that can make this a better case? And he finds the interview with Pinky, the prostitute. And he says to the detectives, "Go out and bring her in here, because maybe she knows more than she's telling us." And they say, okay. Now they go out looking for her. In the interim, that substance that I told you was on the deceased body, the medical examiner examines it and says it's semen. Now, I know, and everybody who's in law enforcement knows, that you can get DNA from semen. So I tell them, hold it, because when we pick somebody up, we're going to get a DNA sample from the defendant and compare it to this stuff that's on the body. And sure enough, when we pick up the real killer, I make a motion in court to have his blood taken so that we can get DNA extracted from it and compare it to what I'm certain is his semen on the body. Well, I'll never forget this, Tom, as long as I live. I get the report from the medical examiner's office for the comparison. It's not his semen. He's been identified by the woman. I know. Oh, another thing is Pinky tells the cops about what she saw him wearing that night and what the woman saw him wearing, the roommate, and it turns out he left it in the concession stand. So we have that clothing, and it's very unusual clothing. So I'm figuring, listen, I got a decent case. If I get the DNA match, it's going to be a great case. It doesn't match. I went back to my office, and Gioka goes back to his office and slams the door and just, he's cursing to himself. How could you do this? How did you make the case worse? So Gioka and myself, both of us, go back and take the file, as I said before, and we start going through it. There's something we missed. Is there anything else in here? And I come across, and so does Gioka, Pinky's interview. And I say, we got not much out of it. Let's bring her in. Maybe she knows more than she's telling me. She told the police. And sure enough, they bring her in. Now, 2 detectives went to her apartment in Coney Island at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They come into my office about 5:30 with her. And I say to one of the detectives, where'd you find her? He said, we went to her apartment. She was getting ready for work. Well, she was going out to stroll the boardwalk and be a prostitute. She sits down and she tells me this whole story. And she did know more. She had the confrontations with him on the boardwalk, and then later in her brother's house. That all was new. I said, okay, that's great. That's great. And you know him? Yeah, I know him. He's one of the bad guys. I said to her, what do you mean? She said, all of the working girls hate him because he beats us up after he rapes us and doesn't want to pay us. So she knows who this guy is. And in the book, Pinky, I call it something different in the book, knows who Ricky Sabar is for the same reason. So I'm listening. I said, okay. I said, all right. But you want me to believe you that you know this guy, you know that he's the killer? She said, I know he's the killer. I saw him coming down the boardwalk, that kind of thing. I said, well, how can you explain then how his semen was not the semen that was on the body? She goes, she looks at me. She says, are you crazy? Of course I know. I know what the reason is. I said, you do? She says, yeah. She said, he buys my John's semen from me after I give the John's blowjobs. I take the condom that is on the John's penis after he ejaculates into the condom. I slide it off, and instead of throwing it away, I tie a knot in the top and I put it into my purse. Sabar, in the book, buys those condoms for $5 a piece. She says it's another way for me to make money. I said, you want me to believe?
You explained that before, but I just kind of popped into my head. Is it like a chicken or the egg thing? Did he ask and she said I could provide, or was she just saving these as is? I'm just curious.
He asked. I didn't get to that yet. Let me tell you what.
All right. Okay, because that's a very just. Sorry.
So she says, so I am like you right now. I look at her and I say, well, you want me to believe that? Who's going to believe that story?
Yeah.
She says, well, I'll tell you, I have another customer who buys them from me as well. He's a Russian guy who works at a live sex show in Manhattan. And he buys the condoms because in order to make it look real, at the end, when the male partner finishes, they want to show the audience the dripping of semen. And of course, the real performer is not going to, he's wearing a condom. So they need something to pretend that he has come and that it's dripping onto the floor of the stage. So that guy found out from the Ricky Sabar character that Sabar buys condoms from Pinky and puts the Russian onto Pinky, and he pays better than Sabar does. So she has a business. She sells these used condoms to both the Sabar character and the Russian. And I said, really, what's the Russian's name? She says, all I know his name is whatever it was, Igor or something. I forgot the guy's name. He said, you find him, he'll tell you what I'm saying is true. So Now she really is a pleasant woman, believe it or not. And I could see why she did well in her business, because she wasn't one of these hard ass looking prostitutes who was nasty. She was really nice. So she said, so at the end of the interview, I said, all right, Pinky, thank you very much. And she thanked me and she said, you're a nice guy for a law enforcement person. I said, oh, okay, thank you very much. So she gets up and says, I said to her, I'll see you again because I'm going to use you as a witness. She says, no problem. So she gets up from her chair. She starts to walk out. Now her back is to me. As she gets to my office door, she bends over and she lifts her skirt up. She had one of these little skating skirts on. She was naked underneath and she mooned me in my office.
And wasn't that like her like gift
That
to
was,
you?
that was our wave goodbye.
I don't even know if I would take that as a. I mean, I guess it's like one of those things where it's like in their culture, that's a good thing.
She,
In
she
real
gave
life,
me the biggest
I'd be like, get the
She gave me the biggest smile you could possibly imagine. She
yeah.
waved and then walked out.
I mean, I
Let
guess
me tell you, let me skip ahead a little bit. You know what she became? She became one of the best witnesses I ever had. She became sort of like a mascot for all the other DAs when she used to come in and I would prep her.
hmm
She was also on the balls of her ass in terms of money, etc.
yeah.
And she happened to be very slim. And one of the ADAs in the office, a slim woman, got to like her and used to take her out to buy clothing and then give her clothing that she had. So she became somebody who everybody in the office cared for.
Sure.
She also, again, I'll skip ahead. She also, while she was a witness for us and while people were kind of friendly to her, she met somebody. She met a guy who was a legitimate guy, not a John. And I get a call from her one day and she tells me about this guy who she's in love with and that she's been seeing him. Now, I didn't know that before, and that they were getting married. And then she calls me after that and tells me she's having a baby. She is now married, lives in another state, and has, I don't know, at least one child, maybe two. So I
God
like to,
bless.
and I'm going to be very, very honest about it. I like to take credit for actually saving this woman's life because
Sure.
she was on the balls. Really, really. I don't know where she was going to go and probably dead. She probably would have
Yeah.
been found under the boardwalk dead. So now I have an excuse. I have a reason for the semen not matching the bad guy, right? So I think, and Michael Gioka thinks, all right, the case is a little bit better. It's not bad. With the roommate, with the clothing, with Pinky, it's not a great case, but it's not the worst case, right? So he proceeds ahead and he tells the detectives, find the Russian. Find the Russian. If we find the Russian, then I call the Russian to the stand and he backs up, he corroborates Pinky, and now I got another witness, right? I'm home one night. I'll never forget this. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I get a call from the detectives. I said, what are you calling for? What are you doing? I said, I'm not doing anything. What do you need me for? Can you get out to the precinct, Coney Island precinct? We think we found the Russian. I said, are you kidding me? They said, no, this is the guy, because they had interviewed him when they picked him up. How they found him, Tom, I still don't know, but they found him. I get there and I interview him. He tells me the exact story, and he tells Michael Gioka the exact story that Pinky told him. The bad guy, the killer, put him on to her because he ran a sex show over in Manhattan. He needed the semen. He was buying Pinky's used condoms, and it was a great business for him and a great business for her. She was making a lot more money than she made with the bad guy, with the killer. So I'm in decent shape now, and so is Gioka. Fast forward to around the trial time, right? We're getting ready for trial. Pinky's all set. She's going to testify. Now I need to talk to and prepare the woman, the roommate. Nobody can find her. Now, in the book, I lead the readers to believe that maybe Satan did something to her, maybe killed her. But Michael in the book and this Michael are not going to sit by and just let them, not go do something to try to find this woman, find out what has happened to her. So it's probably November, maybe close to beginning of December. It's freezing out. And and in the book, Gioka and two detectives put our coats on and we go to Coney Island. And we begin to walk the boardwalk and stop at every single concession stand or business that's open. Aren't that many businesses open in Coney Island in the middle of the winter. We leave our business cards everywhere. We talk to people on the street. They all know the roommate. She's well known in Coney Island. So they knew who you were talking about, but nobody had seen her. And in real life, nobody had seen her. Said, oh shit, what the hell has happened, man? If she dies, I got no case. I can't, she's an eyewitness. So after, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 hours out there walking around, we had no luck. We drive back to the office. We're sitting in my office, me and the two detectives, and it's warming up, having a cup of coffee. And the detective gets a call on his cell phone. And it's the precinct. They said, come on out. We have your woman, the woman you're looking for. So my guy goes out to the precinct. An hour or so later, comes back with the roommate. I said, how did they find her? My detective tells me that the desk sergeant said to him that he's at the desk and some guy comes in almost dragging this woman by the neck, and she has my detective's business card, that card we were leaving all over. He has it, and he says to the desk officer, this guy wants her. And he gives him the card. And the card is Detective Steve Bondor from the Brooklyn DA's office, probably calls up. That's how we get her. That's how we get her. She, I told you, had mental problems. She had gone on a bender. Now, we say to her, look, we're going to keep you. We're going to put you in a hotel. We're going to have people guarding you, because I needed her.
Yeah.
We were beginning the trial. I needed her. She said she was happy. She said, sure, that's great. She had 3 meals a day. She had a warm bed. She had, people watching her. Here was the rub. Again, it's Friday night. Court's adjourned. Monday morning, she was my star witness about to testify, right? Saturday night, I'm out to dinner with my then wife and friends, and I get a call. It was one of the detectives who were on duty guarding her at the hotel. And she tells me, it's a female detective. She says, Mike, there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, I'll give you a first name. Her name is Christine. She says, Christine is going nuts here. I said, why? What are you talking about? She said, Mike, did you know that she was addicted to blood pressure medication? I said, I had no idea she had high blood pressure. Well, the detective says, I don't know if she does, but she had this bottle of these pills, and unbeknownst to them, she was popping them one after the other after the other. The only reason they found out is the pill bottle was empty. She wanted them to go out and get a refill for her of this prescription blood pressure medicine. So I said, are you crazy? She says, no, I'm telling you, that's what she's addicted to, this medicine. And she says, if she doesn't get the medicine and we don't give it to her, that you, meaning me, and in the book, Gioka, can go fuck yourselves. She ain't testifying. So I tell her, do what you can. In the book, Gioka speaks to another detective, and the detective says, I got a friend at a hospital. I'll get a prescription. It won't be that prescription, but it'll be something that looks like those pills, and we'll just tell her that it's those pills, and we'll give her, 1 or 2 a day. The detectives in real life were able to refill the prescription. And when they came back with it, she was very happy, but they told her, we're not giving you the bottle.
Yeah.
We'll give you 1 pill a day. That made her
Fucking set
nuts.
her off.
So Michael says, and this Michael said, let her calm down. We'll talk on Sunday, tomorrow, the next day. Next day, in the book, Gioka talks to the detectives. How is she? They say she's fine. She's accepted the pills, the bogus pills. She thinks that they're, her pills. And she's okay. She's so okay that she wants, and this is now in the book, she wants us to go to the concession stand and call a boyfriend of hers who's now living with her to bring some clothes for her for court. So in the book, Gioka says, boyfriend. She said, I didn't know she had a boyfriend. Well, it turns out in the book, the guy who dragged her into the station house to turn herself in was jizz. He had the mark. And why was he doing it? Because he was setting up Michael to fail in the courtroom. He had set her up to do all of the things that she had done with the medicine. The blood pressure stuff was all a bogus excuse for the next day, on Monday, her telling the detectives, you can tell Gioka to go fuck himself. I ain't testifying. In real life, that's what happened to me. I walk into the courthouse. I said, bring her to the courthouse. She goes to the courthouse. Gioka tells her, you're going into the courtroom. And I tell her, you're going into the courtroom. You saying you lied? You're saying that I forced you to testify? You're saying that none of this happened? Well, you're going to have to tell a judge under oath. And I know you're lying. And you know what I'm going to do then? I'm going to indict you for perjury. And Gioka does the same thing. She says, I don't give a fuck. Put me in there. I don't care. Now, in real life, this case was covered by the news media because this is a guy who killed 6 firefighters and had gotten off. So now he's arrested again. He becomes a criminal celeb. And there's it was NBC was covering my trial, and they had a reporter there who was watching every single day. He sees all of this stuff going on in the hallway outside the courtroom. And he goes into the courtroom when I put her on the stand and when Gioka puts her on the stand. And Tommy, she goes absolutely apeshit on the stand. She's screaming at me, screaming at the judge, screaming, I didn't, and she's on and on and on about how the DA did this, the DA did that. I don't know anything. I don't know. And in the book, of course, this is all instigated by our friend, the devil. The judge says, okay, I've heard enough. All of it's on the record. Now you'll have to suffer the consequences. The DA may indict you for perjury. She says, I don't care. I don't give a fuck, blah, 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 right? So now let me tell you what happens in real life. That night, when I go home, my first son was probably about 6 or 7. And he and his mother had been watching television because I told them that they were covering this. And he saw this entire fiasco on TV. Her screaming at me, her accusing me of all kinds of stuff. So I walk in the door and I say, give him a kiss. He hugs me and he says to me, Daddy, why was that lady screaming at you? What did you do to her that made her scream so much at you? I said to my wife at the time, what happened? She said, I had it on. I had the news on and it came on. He saw you and he sat there and watched the whole thing. It was unbelievably humiliating, Tommy. It was unreal. I mean, here it was, this lying bitch on the stand saying things that I did to her, and Gioka is also humiliated as well. So he still has, and I still had one card to play, and that's Pinky.
Mhm.
Pinky testifies the next day and is spectacular. Spectacular. She tells the whole story. By the way, in real life, I could never get the Russian again. He was not coming into court to testify. He runs a live sex show in Manhattan. He wasn't going to come into a courtroom and subject himself to that. So the case was down to Pinky. She tells the whole story about him running down the boardwalk, about him confessing to her in his brother's apartment, about his penchant for raping prostitutes and not paying them, and of course the whole idea of her selling him used condoms, which explains what I had to put on the stand about the semen on the dead woman's body. Tom, she was better than I could ever expect her to be. She was spectacular. We break for the day. I sum up the next day. And I'm thinking, I'm always, sometimes in a situation like this, you try to think to yourself, is a quick verdict a good verdict? Is a long, deliberation good for you? It's hard to say. But in this case, I have to say I was not counting on a conviction, and I was counting on being in court, maybe they'd be out for an hour and they would say, there's not enough here. 5 days later, Tommy, there was no verdict. 5 days they were out until there was a verdict, and it was not favorable. And Gioca's verdict was not favorable. It was a not guilty. And I and Gioca go talk to the jurors afterwards. And what happens? The jurors say to me, this is word for word what the jurors said to me and what I write in the book that they said to Gioca. Mr. Gioca, if you only had one more witness, we would have convicted him. We believed whatever her name was, Pinky. She used her real name. We believed everything she said. We understood what she was talking about, but it was just one witness, and we all felt that we couldn't convict somebody for murder based on the testimony of just one witness. Who was my one witness? Who was Gioca's one other witness? The roommate who showed up at the house, at the apartment, the hotel room, to deliver the clothes that she asked for during that fiasco with the pills. Well, her boyfriend. And in the book, you know who that was? That was Jizz. And it turns out that a detective, after the fact in the book, didn't understand what was going on, but told Gioca, who was kind of doing a post-trial investigation about that whole incident in the hotel room. He says, Mr. Gioca, I didn't know what they were saying, but I know he was saying something about the pills and something about, her not, I thought he said not testifying or refusing. Maybe that's what happened. And of course it was the devil telling her that this is the plan. I'm going to give you those pills. Those pills are, I'm sorry, they're going to give you these pills. The pills are no good. They're not blood pressure pills. Of course, in the book, the pills were not blood pressure pills that the devil was feeding her. They were opioids, and he got her hooked on the opioids, which is why he had control of her, because he was delivering the stuff to her when she needed it. So in real life, the only good part about this is that Pinky became a productive, wonderful citizen who wound up with a husband and a baby. And in the book, the end of the story is this. Romano asks Michael out to dinner along with the head of the secret agency that has recruited him to fight the devil. And he wonders what this is all about. They've never taken him out to dinner, the two of them. And he thinks that maybe he's getting, they're going to just shut everything down because he lost this case. And they tell him just the opposite. Sabar, the guy who killed the woman on the boardwalk and who was identified but they couldn't arrest in the murder. I'm sorry, in the hotel fire, which caused the murder of the fire marshal, has been arrested. Why? Because during the trial of the Coney Island homicide, it was on television. The guy that I told you about was broadcasting the trial, right? And two people who were in the hotel who saw him start the fire were two migrants who had come to New York because they heard that New York was a place that was giving out free stuff. They got a job at the hotel. They saw him set the fire, but they didn't say anything right away because they were afraid of getting deported. But after the mayor embraced them and told them, you know, you're welcome here, etc., they came forward and they told the police all about Sabar setting the fire in the hotel. And what was the point of the meeting? At some point, I won't spoil this because I want you people to read the book. They just want them to know that Sabar is not going to get away with this, with murder, because he was arrested when he walked out of the courthouse a free man, thinking he was a free man in your case, Mike. Fire marshals arrested him and charged him with the murder of the fire marshal in the Manhattan hotel fire. Now, I'm going to give you a little preview. That's not the end of the hotel fire saga. In part 3 and part 4, I touch on it. And then at the end, the epilogue is the kind of the big bang that leads into book 3. Okay. So, so I know that we're up against some time frame here, but can I tell you one very quick story about Pinky?
Yeah.
She was coming to my office, I told you, on a regular basis to talk to me and to tell me things, and she became someone who just liked hanging around the office, and other DAs took care of her, etc. So she was coming in to prep for trial one day, and she came in earlier than me, and she was sitting at the front desk in the DA's office on a bench, and people were coming to work, DAs and investigators and secretaries, and I come to work and I see her. I say, come on, let's go. Come into my office. We got work to do. So I see that she's really, and this is in real life, she's really nervous. And I tell the story in the book too with Gioka. And I sit her down and I say, Pinky, what's going on? Something's wrong. Did somebody do something? Did Gioka thought maybe jizz got to her or something? And she says, no. She says, Michael, while I was sitting out at the desk, all the people coming to work, I saw one of my clients. I said, what? Says, I saw one of my clients. He came to work. He works here. I had to describe, and the guy had such a distinct description.
Yeah.
Tommy, I knew exactly who she was talking about. He worked on my floor, and he worked on Gioka's floor in the book. I go to the DA, and the DA says to me, you get him in your office and read him the riot act. Whatever relationship they have has to end. So I get him in. He's shaking. He came in, he was literally shaking. And I said, you know why you're here? He goes, yeah, I figured I am here. He says, but I got to tell you that it's not what you think. She's a really nice woman. I said, yeah, I know she is. And you're a client of hers. He goes, well, you know, I have a Cadillac, and I have a convertible, and I drive around, and I was driving around Coney Island. Where was he driving? On the strip where all the prostitutes drive. And she came over to the car, and he said, you know, she was so nice that I asked her to get in the car, and I took her for a ride, and I paid her for her time, but I've never had sex with her. I said, you want me to believe that? She's a client. She called you a client. She goes, no. And I like her so much that sometimes I go there just to bring her a bouquet of flowers because I think that she's such a nice woman. I said, listen, I don't give a shit what your relationship is with her. It ends today. Do you understand that? And Gioka says the same thing to him. Yeah. I said, because if we get wind of the fact that you're still out there, I'm going to have to tell the DA, and you're not going to have a job. So end it at this point. So that was one of the little kind of side events for Miss Pinky. And she was a witness that obviously I'll never forget. And Gioka also has the same obviously has the same relationship and the same reaction to her as I did. And I expand on how the Russian and she passed the information that he needs stuff from her, etc. So the book, I think, is true to the story. Obviously, the homeless woman was not a former nun, but it added to the
Mm-hmm.
idea that the devil was after her because of her ties to the religion. So so that's part two. And it doesn't end completely with part two, this whole idea of the Manhattan Hotel fire, as I said before, but hopefully you'll have me back and I'll ultimately get to tell you the end of that story. So I
Absolutely.
urge your people to go out and buy book two, buy book one and book two. I think they'll really like it. Well, you like it. You told me that.
I've loved them, and like I said, they really are fun. They're dark, they're horrifying, but they are fun because they're real, and that's why I would urge y'all to go
Well,
get it.
real life is horrifying, Tom. You know
Yeah,
that.
I mean, no, but yeah, factually it is. Factually it
Yep.
is. So that's the thing, is like they are all real. So um, but uh, like I told you beforehand, we are off weekends time, so we got to wrap it up rather quickly. So I apologize for the unceremonious wrapping up, but
It's
um,
okay.
shoot me a text, and as always, just so I
I will.
remember, and I'll schedule you in again. Um, and yeah, guys, please go in the description. Please go get the book. And if you don't believe me, just go back and listen to old episodes with them. Just type in Fallen Angel. It'll be the same thumbnail for this series of episodes. And
Yeah.
yeah, man, it's fun. It's
It'd be great. It'd be great for people who like this crime stuff for
yeah,
as a Christmas gifts, because we're getting close to the holidays, and
yeah.
giving someone a story about the devil for Christmas seems like an anomaly, but it's not. It's about someone who fights the devil and who does a good job doing it too.
Yeah,
So
no, the spoiler alert, the devil gets fucked. Not literally, by the prostitutes. In
no,
theory, it's
but
the devil.
you got to believe he was very happy when Ricky Sabar walked out of the courtroom a free man in Brooklyn, only to be arrested to be brought to Manhattan for the other fire that he thought he got away with. So um, he ain't getting away with a lot.
Never a dull episode with you, Mike. Never a dull episode with your stories. Um, but please shoot me a text, guys. Please go in the description. Please go grab the book, or go grab any of the other books. They're all equally horrifying. And yeah, till next time, Mr. Vecchione. Thank you as
Very
always
good,
for your
Tom.
time. I love your stories, and as I said,
Thank you.
I like the shirt.
Yeah, I love the
You're
way you
welcome.
dress too, man.
Handsome guy, Mr. Vecchione. Thank you so much,
Take
guys.
care, Tommy.
Please go
Thank
support
you
him.
for having me.